I'm really impressed there are so many people wanting to come in here and talk about an avatars on such a beautiful summer evening, given that it might be the last beautiful evening of the summer. I should start by saying that this is my avatar, that the real Henrietta Moore is actually somewhere else enjoying some music in another part of the festival. So if you see her afterwards, tell her that it was a good talk. Now, I'm a social anthropologist, and that means that I'm very curious about people, about how they think about themselves and about how they interact with other people. And that's really what got me into anthropology. And we take these things for granted much of the time. But actually, I want to suggest to you this evening that neither managing a self nor creating a society is necessarily an easy or a self-evident thing to do. And it's actually quite difficult. And one of the things that interests me about avatars and about virtual worlds is the idea of both of creating a self and of creating a society at the same time. Now, because we have technology all around us today, with digital technology, with animation, with computers and so on, there's a kind of assumption that the virtual is new, that this is entirely new in human society, it's a new thing for human culture. Actually, the virtual is not at all new. Humans have always been interested in and engaged with the virtual and fascinated by the possibilities of technology of all kinds. So, for example, the moment you draw a cave painting like this, which is 17,000 years old from Lascaux, you use hunting magic to try to draw the animals onto your spears, or you commune with your dead ancestors, or your spirits, or your gods, and you're in the world of the imagination, and you're in the virtual. These things, of course, are not part of the immediate physical world, but they can be brought into being in the physical world. They can be made manifest in signs, in objects, and in actions, and that's what this painting was in part about. And making manifest the things of the imagination, making them real, making them close, bringing them close to you, is a very old kind of human preoccupation and a human potential as well. Now, when we think about technology, we have to imagine what purposes do we put technology to in human societies. And I suppose technology is really about extending our reach into the world. It's about our ability to control the world, both physical and virtual. And when we think about technology, the most powerful, probably, of all our technologies, and the one that is the most virtual, is language itself. It's the one that has the greatest impact on ourselves. It's the one that has the greatest impact on our worlds. And language is, of course, the technology that is most a part of us. It's something that we actually do with our bodies. And its virtual character is extraordinary. Its reach is amazing. We can use it to refer to our gods, to talk about people who are long dead, to construct something as fragile and as material as an identity. We can use it to capture the beauty of a fleeting day, to imagine the future, and to create all kinds of social relationships with people around us. And of course, the materialization of language in writing only enhances those capacities. So everything from lists to letters to novels extends our ability to create new kinds of worlds. So when we think about the way technology brings things into being, we have to think about lots and lots of other kinds of technologies other than the computer, the digital, the things that we're used to thinking of as technologies now. For example, take a look at this piece of technology. This is a wonderful piece of technology from New Ireland in Papua New Guinea, and it's a Malangan sculpture. And when somebody dies, a sculpture like this is made, it's created. And the idea is that when a death happens, that all the things that that person has done in the world are still manifest in the world. The gardens he has planted are still growing. The crops will still come from them. The woman he was married to is still there. His house is still standing. Everything that he's done is distributed across the landscape. There's evidence everywhere that he was once alive doing something. And so what people do is they want to gather together the impact of that person on the world, bring it into one place, make manifest everything that he did whilst he was alive, in a sense celebrate it. And when they have it all together, when they have stored it into one great and beautiful carving like that, they destroy it. And the only reason why this sculpture survives is because, of course, it was cast away by the people who made it. They intended to destroy it. And European traders who came along, this is one from the 1880s in the British Museum, said, oh, this is really lovely, let's take it home and put it in the British Museum. As you know, the British Museum has historically had a tendency to go around the world picking up other people's things and saying, that's lovely, thank you very much, we'll take it home with us. Anyway, so this is one of them. But when the early colonists first went to the very, very remote parts of highland Papua New Guinea, they took with them things which people had never seen before. And the chief amongst those things were telephones and cameras. Now just imagine what an extraordinary thing a telephone is. A telephone actually allows you to talk to somebody who's nowhere near you, right? If you take a photograph of somebody, you can bring that person into a space that you inhabit, close to you. You can say, here, see this person. This person's not in the same room as you. This person may even not be alive. And so the Highlanders of Papua New Guinea were amazingly impressed with European technology because they thought that it had the ability to bring people into relation with each other when they were no longer together. And they very often took the view that telephones were probably a way of Europeans speaking with their dead ancestors, and that this was going to give them an enormous amount of power because of that ability to transcend space and time. So photography and film, I think, has that capacity for us still. It fascinates us. It draws us into a kind of fascination by bringing us into connection with something that isn't really there. And it's a strange thing to think that we now don't recognize how important older technologies were. So, for example, in the 80s and the 1890s, people actually got married over the telegraph. I mean, this is very hard to imagine now how you would do that, right? But people thought this was a great way to get married because it's fantastic. It's fantastic new technology. Using the telegraph, we can actually get married, and let's do it. It's modern. Why not, right? So the human capacity to be interested into technology, to imagine that there's always going to be something new that you can do, that you can extend the reach of being human, that you can do something that other people can't do, that you kind of capture it, is always been there, and has been a very, very important part of anything that we think about as being virtual. So when we think about contemporary virtual worlds, are they different in any way from these other kinds of virtuality? Is there something very special about them that makes them different? And that's one of the things I want to think about. And I want to suggest that perhaps they're not as different from these old kinds of technologies as we think. That what they do is to dramatically enhance our capacity for these forms of extension, for this imaginative visualization across space and time. But that's something that we've, as I've said, we've always been able to do. So I want to show you now one of the very first, a promotional video from one of the very first virtual worlds to be created, which I have to say was only 1985. Let's see if it'll work for us.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Parallel world discovered, fully equipped. Oh, hey, mister, here's your paper. Intelligent beings, mighty the works. Read all about it. Hey, lady, here, have a paper. Extra,
yeah, let me see that.
5 cents, Pops.
The name's not Pops. I just want to find out about this here parallel world.
It's called Habitat, but cough up that dough, Pops. No playing games.
Jimmy, the name's not Pops. Look, I promise I'll pay you as sure as my name is Valentino.
Valentino? What's going on here? What kind of game are you playing, Pops?
Pops and his friend Jimmy aren't the first people to get drawn into this strange new world where names can change as quickly as events. Surprises lurk at every turn, and the keynotes of existence are fantasy and fun, here in a place called Habitat.
What's a teleport booth? Where am I? And who in the heck are you?
It is said that boredom once ruled the lifestyles of the avatars, the beings who populate this world. But recently, all that changed.
Yeah, no boredom now, not in the modern virtual world. Now, I love the clunkiness of that of that virtual world and thinking that it's actually only, what, 25, 30 years old. So it's amazing how much these things have changed. If we just look at the variety, or some of the varieties of virtual worlds that exist, because there are lots of different ones, and in each kind of virtual world there are different kinds of avatars, and people have different kinds of relationships with those avatars in the different world. So this is one that's probably familiar to some of you. This is the rather wonderfully named Farmville, which is, of course, is available on Facebook and on the iPhone application. In Farmville, what you do is that you plough and plant and grow crops, and you go and visit your friends, and you get them to come and work on your farm, and you hang out with them as much as possible. On the English version, which is the one you see here, they've just introduced a new sheep breeding program, which is immensely popular amongst the English, right? Other societies, other cultures in the world which have their own Farmville don't have sheep breeding. So there's something very peculiar about the sheep breeding, which I'll come back to in a minute. Anyway, now, for those of you who are skeptical about these things, I'd just like to tell you that Farmville has 62 million actual users, okay? So if you think that virtual worlds are for geeks and teenagers, then you will, I'm afraid, have to think again. Let's look at another one which is immensely popular. This is the world of Warcraft. Now, the world of Warcraft is one of these massively multiplayer online role-playing games, as they are known. It has 11.4 million subscribers. You can play either against the environment, against other players, or in this case, this is a guild kind of attack that's going on. And in one of these guild attacks, you need to have at least 60 players cooperating, or 60 avatars cooperating together. The success, of course, of these kinds of worlds is very often about annihilating other people, about playing in groups who are set off against each other across rather fixed kind of social hierarchies, different kinds of classes of people, different kinds of ethnicities. And these kinds of games draw on things that you will have long been familiar with, and particularly, for example, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, cyberpunk, lots of kind of cartoons of the sort that Brian Talbot produces and so on. These things, all of these kinds of images you will find in World of Warcraft, and draws on older ideas about myths. So you find griffins, you find elves, you find all kinds of mythical characters existing in this world. Recently, a Republican senator in the United States got very, very annoyed because he discovered that the National Science Foundation had given an anthropologist quite a large sum of money to study the world of Warcraft, and had written a book called My Life as a Night Elf Priest, which the Republican senator thought was a huge waste of money, and that people shouldn't be allowed to do this. But actually, lots of people are coming into virtual worlds. They're not only playing in them, but they're doing a variety of other things. Let's look at another one. This is, of course, the fabulous Second Life. And I don't know how many of you in this room are a resident of Second Life. But Second Life is an extraordinary space. Linden Lab, of course, maintains the platform with a basic sort of, sea and sky and so on, but all the rest of it, every other thing that's created, is the result of the people who are the residents. Millions and millions and millions of hours of work have gone into the creation of Second Life. You can create anything in it, including the texture of your clothing, the texture of wood that I'm sitting on here could be easily reproduced in Second Life. It's has 1.5 million people living in it. Now, in all of these kinds of virtual worlds, we have different kinds of avatars, and people have different relationships with their avatars. Avatars aren't necessarily just, we can't assume that we know what the relationship is between people and their avatars. So if I just show you now 3 very beautiful images from Robbie Cooper's book called Alter Ego on Avatars, you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about. So this is the young woman concerned, and this is her avatar. And this is a very good example of a kind of fantasy sort of avatar. And what she says about playing the game with her avatar is that she's playing the game and the avatar has to concentrate on being her, which I think is an interesting one. This is another one. And this young woman, when asked about why she liked being this particular kind of avatar, said because, you know, nobody can see how you really look online. That your avatar can be transcendent. It can be something well beyond you. It can give you capacities which you couldn't have yourself. And this man, when asked about it, said that, you know, what it's about is about trying to create somebody who is very, very like me, but slightly better, right? And so this is a kind of augmentation model, okay? And I can see what he means. I mean, you know, it does look kind of like him, but it does look kind of slightly better. I'm slightly puzzled by the smarty trousers, but I think, but that might be an age thing on my part. I'm not quite sure, but. So then you ask yourself, well, what on earth are people doing in these virtual worlds? I mean, you know, what are they doing? They're spending an enormous amount of time in them. What could possibly they be doing? Well, they are driving cars, they are going shopping, they're taking the dog for a walk, they're falling in love, they're having babies. Lots of babies born in Second Life now. If you take the standard baby avatar model, it doesn't cost you anything. But if you want a really nice-looking baby, it's going to cost you a lot of money in Linden dollars. And you have to remember that Linden dollars are fully convertible with the US dollar. Okay? So the people who are selling you the babies are making a fair, well, cent or two. I was going to say bob or two, but a fair cent or two out of it. You can fly, you can swim with dolphins, you can go to gay bars, and much more importantly, you can make real money. Lots of people make real money out of the markets that exist in Second Life. Almost everything can be bought and sold. Nowadays, businesses, lots of big businesses are in Second Life. IBM regularly holds its business meetings in Second Life. Lots of other companies also go to Second Life to have conferences, to do brand enhancement, to try to get access to new kinds of customers. Lots of comedians go and perform there, lots of bands perform there, well-known bands and so on. One thing I should say about the companies who go work there is that this sheep thing comes up again, because there's a Washington, D.C. company with a rather fantastic name of Electric Sheep, which set itself up as a way of trying to leverage Second Life for the Fortune 500 companies. And I haven't quite worked out what this thing is about virtual worlds and sheep, but I'm planning to put in an application to the National Science Foundation to see if I can get lots of money for working it out. But of course, the oldest profession in the world is very, very much in favour in Second Life. Yeah, well, and there's more of it as well. So, you know, if you'd like to log on, that's fine. But that was all I could manage personally. But the other thing that I find a bit strange about these worlds as well is that they're infected, and I suppose this is not at all surprising, by all the things that infect our own lives, by our own kinds of frailties and fears, and that's what you would expect. And so, rather worryingly, recently there's been a large number of suicides in Second Life. There have been quite a number of suicide bombers. Now, part of this, of course, is that other virtual worlds are themselves fantasy and very violent. And perhaps some of this is infecting Second Life. But I think Second Life is not normally like that. And I think that this question of people taking their own life is something that should make us reflect again on what's happening in the relationship between the avatar and the person who creates that avatar. It's one thing to create your avatar. Why would you then want to commit suicide or to have your avatar commit suicide? But what I'm trying to say to you, though, is that whatever's going on in these worlds, which is sometimes called cyber sociality, that it's not insignificant. There are very large numbers of people involved. They're spending a lot of time doing it. They're spending a lot of money. They're earning a lot of money in some cases. So people are not only creating their worlds, but creating them themselves. For example, sometimes when people say, oh, I don't know about these virtual worlds, they can't really be very important. Well, the most recent research on this suggests that some people are spending about between 22 and 25 hours a week in a virtual world. So that's 1 day a week. So if you live to be 70, you will have spent 10 years of your life in a virtual world, right? Now that's an extraordinary amount of time. That means you're spending as much time in a virtual world as you might be doing playing sport, probably more. The way in which people find time to do this, because most people, or many people who are doing this have full-time jobs, apparently, is that they've simply given up watching the television, right? Which is what they were doing before, and given up going to the cinema. Now what they do is they go into the virtual world and they interact with other people. They spend time with them. One of the things about virtual worlds that interests me as an anthropologist is the sort of moral panic that kind of hovers over them. Now, this is something that in life, moral panic hovers over quite a few things in life. I'm going to talk later in the festival about the decline of the nuclear family. There's a lot of moral panic hanging over that too. Quite a few things in life worry people. So people say these worlds, they're dangerous, they're addictive, they're escapist, they're a kind of social pathology, there's a problem with them. You know, how can we explain how and why a Harvard-trained economist spends all his Saturday afternoons as a small green female frog, you know? I mean, and when we're not worrying about him, we're thinking that there are paedophiles behind every virtual bush, you know, so that people are extremely worried about what goes on in these places. Now, it is true, as I've said to you, that there is an element of fantasy in a lot of them. It's true also that people often want to be, in some sense, non-human. They like to be part animal. Now, that's, of course, a very, very old idea. People have often wanted to be, you know, put on animal masks, put on the heads or skins of animals to take the power of animals. That's a very old way of extending human capacity and human creativity, getting a power that isn't there, right? And many of these worlds, of course, are full of the living dead. I mean, vampires are everywhere. Vampires are very popular at the moment, but in books, in comics, in all sorts of places. And, of course, they're very popular in film, and so they're very popular in virtual worlds. There are lots, as I've said before, elves and griffins, and there are lots of werewolves. So, yes, there are fantasy elements. But I think we have to take the avatar question and the virtual world question a bit more seriously than that. You know, what is my relationship with my avatar, if I create an avatar of myself? Now, part of this is just that old difficulty that we have when we say in English, me, myself, and I. Are all these things the same? Me, myself, and I. Do we always think about ourselves as having slightly distributed senses of self, slightly different capacities, slightly different ways of figuring ourselves or referring to ourselves or thinking about ourselves? It's true that in many of these environments, and particularly in Second Life, quite a number of people have more than one avatar. They're distributed across space and time within the world in different ways. And these relationships of these so-called alts or alternatives can be quite complicated. There's one particular example of a player who created an alt, or created a male avatar, then decided to create another avatar, a female one. Then in the virtual world in which they were interacting together, the male and the female avatar fell in love with each other. So this person had created two avatars who then fell in love with each other. The first one was a male and the second one was a female. And then it later transpired that the person who created them was a woman. So she created the male first, and then she created the female, and then they fell in love. Now, gender is a fascinating issue in these worlds because lots of people like to be the gender that they are not, or sometimes they like to be both. The general research suggests that many more men want to be women than women want to be men. Now, I don't know what that suggests, but it's nevertheless interesting that changing your gender is extremely important. So perhaps then avatars are just a kind of role-playing. So, I'll just trying it on. So, like dressing up. Maybe I could just put on this costume and do that. Maybe that's all about. Maybe it's just about kind of different facets of one's social self. Maybe it's not at all complicated. But think about this. Let's think about sex and murder. Sex and murder are very interesting in virtual worlds, as I've already said. One of the things that's different about men and women in virtual worlds, that is male and female avatars, not men and women behind them, because we don't know who's behind them most of the time, but female avatars are, when they've been interviewed in virtual worlds, are much more worried about being sexually propositioned or somebody saying something sexually inappropriate to them, and men are much more worried about being killed. Now, this is male avatars, that is. Now, what would happen if somebody did kill your avatar in a virtual world? How would you feel about this? Would you think that they had tried to kill you? Is that really the way you think of the relationship between the avatar and yourself? Or would you think it was more like a sort of grievous bodily harm, that they'd somehow tried to hurt an aspect of you, or do away with a certain manifestation of you? Or would you think it was more like destroying a piece of your property, like, for example, blowing up your car? Maybe your avatar's just that. Or would you think that it was more like killing your cat? How would you feel about somebody actually attacking your avatar? And one of the things that's very, very important is that self and persona in general in life are things that we actually have to create. We create them in relation with others. The selves we already have in the physical world we're inhabiting now are to a certain extent virtual. So there's nothing strange about having virtual selves who are avatars. I mean, the intersubjective nature of selfhood, the fact that we don't do it alone and we can't do it alone, is what makes us social. We have to create that sense of self that we all have in relationship to other people. It's not already there. We're not born with it, if you like. We develop it as we become drawn into social worlds. So, existing selves are virtual, the avatars are virtual. What makes virtual worlds different, or virtual avatars different? Is there any real difference between the kinds of roles we play? Well, one of the difficulties is that we play many, many different roles in our ordinary lives. For example, if you're me, and I'm talking to you now, and I'm giving this talk, then I won't be exactly the same person as I am when I'm with my family. I'm not going to be exactly the same person as when, for example, if you go to school and you're late picking up your child, and the teacher says to you, why are you late? You've got to be on time. So, one place you're kind of a professor, another place you're a bad mother, right? Another place you're doing something else, right? So all of us have these kind of distributed roles across space and time which we inhabit. So maybe the avatar's just another way of doing that. I'm not quite sure, but I'd like to hear what you think. But I think that one of the things we have to bear in mind is that virtual worlds bring lots of these avatars together. That those avatars are sharing space and time, and they're creating their sense of themselves in that virtual world. And so that the nature of the social relations, if you like, the nature of the selves, which are the avatars, and the nature of the sociality, the kind of character of the social that holds them all together in the social world, that's created in the world. And you can't actually, as the person who's outside the world, necessarily control that. You can't control your avatar once your avatar's in relation to others. You can imagine that you're controlling your avatar, but you're not. There's been quite a bit of work done on this, and the way in which the avatar begins to affect the person who's created it is something called the Proteus effect. So that the avatar affects your behavior. If you create an avatar who does certain kinds of things in that virtual world, you will find that they're having an impact on the way you behave. So when you talk to people, they say, I love being an elf, or I love being a furry animal, or I love being a man in this context, because I can be more outspoken, more outrageous, more aggressive. I can act in different ways. I can think about myself in different ways. So the avatar actually begins to change the person who's supposed to be controlling the avatar. And I think one of the things that's important here is that realities of all kinds, even virtual realities, are unpredictable. That sociality isn't something that we can necessarily control. Now, I just want to finish by saying that thinking about the future of virtual worlds and what will happen to them in the future. Are they going to be part of us? Are they not going to be part of us? I think that we can see here, for example, that universities play an amazingly important part in virtual worlds. This is Harvard, this is Princeton, both of them in Second Life, both of them offer their courses in Second Life, both of them have their faculty working in Second Life as avatars, okay? As I said to you before, there's a lot of research that goes on in these kinds of environments. This is my colleague Tom Belstorff, who teaches in California. That's him sitting interviewing someone in Second Life. Tom's written an entire book called Coming of Age in Second Life. Tom very often performs in Second Life. This is just a very short video of him being drawn into something in Second Life.
Hi, I'm Dusan Rader. I'm sitting in today for Robert Bloomfield. Welcome to Metanomics. Today we're continuing our masterclass series on metanomics, and my guest today is Tom Belstorff, Director of Anthropology from UC Irving. The masterclass series has been looking at everything that affects us virtually. We've looked at a masterclass on the creation of 3D content. We've talked about storytelling, and today we're going to go broad and talk about anthropology, culture, and just about everything. And I know that my guest, Tom Belstorff, can pretty much talk about everything. So for some people in the audience, they might not know about your background, Tom, and the work that you've done both in virtual worlds and more generally. So why don't you share a little bit about yourself? Tell us about yourself.
Sure, and thanks again so much for doing this. It's great just to have a chance to hang with you and see so many friends, old and new, in the audience as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Small amounts of Tom is better, anyway. But anyway, it's just very nice to hang with you. So, but I was in California recently teaching a class of students who had been, they told me, in a class with Tom Belstorff. And I said, wow, that's really interesting. And when was that? And it transpired as the conversation went on that this class had actually taken place in Second Life, right? So when Tom says that he sees people in the audience there in Second Life that he sees regularly, he does. He spends quite a lot of his working life actually in Second Life as his avatar, right? Now, he's not the only person who do this. These IBM executives who come in and out to do these conferences, who do their business calls, lots of kinds of people are there in Second Life. What's interesting about it, though, is that when talking to students about being in Second Life now, or indeed being online or being as or having avatars, what they say is, no, you know, I'm not so much interested in these kind of fantasy elements. That's for gaming. But I am interested seriously in being in Second Life. I have actually met Tom Belstorff in Second Life. And that, you know, I need to manage my avatar, my persona. It's a serious business now, because actually I'm going to be spending a significant part of my life in Second Life. Now, it's not that these young people are doing the thing that we all fear. It's not that they cannot tell the difference about the actual world and the virtual world. It's that they expect to spend part of their learning, part of their working life, part of their leisure life in a virtual world. There is a gap for them between the actual world and the virtual world. They can recognize that gap easily, and what they enjoy is precisely that gap. It's switching between those worlds, and that's what the technology is doing. It's enhancing people's capacity to be cultural, to be human, in new and changing ways. And it will go on changing and go on being unpredictable. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Thank you.